They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but with Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin, the artwork is rather indicative of the album inside. It depicts Dylan in black and white, looking world-weary, tired and frustrated. He looks older than his 22 years should betray, in a work shirt with a serious expression on his face. It instantly conjures in the mind the image of Woody Guthrie, the great Dust Bowl folk singer, one of Dylan's heroes. This is not going to be a light-hearted affair. The album preceding this one was the Freewheelin Bob Dylan from 1963, which really planted Dylan on the map as the great American protest singer of the 1960s. Blowin' in the Wind beautifully spoke of racial inequality, while Masters of War rallied against nuclear proliferation. But for every serious protest song concerned with the state of the world on that album, there was also a Girl from the North Country Fair about young love, or Bob Dylan's Dream, a story about Tonto and a Lone Ranger. For each moment of seriousness, there was a moment of levity, something to break it up. It's an album you can simultaneously meditate about the state of the world or enjoy with your hair back on a sunny day. And perhaps it's that balance which makes the Freewheelin such a widely regarded album. But The Times They Are A-Changin, it's quite different. It's quite a bleak affair. It's Bob's most unabashedly political statement. It's not simply just a folk record, it's a historical chronicle of the anti-war civil rights generation. It really is full to the brim with overtly political content, from the title track to Only a Pawn in Their Game to The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll. It really is the only record in Bob's catalogue where you can genuinely say that there was at least a tacit embrace of that tag of being a voice of a generation. This is a through and through protest album, and it makes Bob sound like a through and through protest singer, though this would be the last album of his to be quite so politically motivated. On this record, Dylan is clearly greatly concerned by the injustices of the world, and he wants you to know about it. And with that goal in mind, I feel that, maybe controversially to a Dylan fan, that he manages to actually exceed what he was able to achieve in the Freewheelin. I think The Times They Are A-Changin is a more cohesive record. It's one that's every bit as lyrically fascinating and melodically beautiful as Freewheelin, but it's clearer in its direction, it's narrower in its scope, and that makes it a tighter, better record. So it might be strange after saying all of that when I say that the title track, The Times They Are A-Changin, manages to both set the tone for the record, yet also sound like a direct continuation of Freewheeling, both sonically and lyrically. For me, The Times They Are A-Changin feels like a sequel to Blowin' in the Wind, and an expansion upon what Blowin' in the Wind achieved. Well, Blowin' in the Wind gives the listener this sense that the answer to all of our societal problems is out there, but that we as a society need to come together and recognise it. The Times They Are A-Changin takes a different approach. It has this striking sense of inevitability and directness. It's not simply that the answer is out there blown in the wind and we need to find it, it's that the times they are a-changin'. Your sons and daughters are beyond your command. He triumphantly sings, as if to celebrate the victory of his generation's progressive ideals over the conservative ideals of old. His directness is almost deterministic. He sings, "Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand." Progress for Dylan is not going to be stopped. It's not going to be abated. Any attempt to fight it will be futile in the end. So you may as well just get out of this new world, unless you want to lend a hand. I really love the directness in this song. It offers a brief note of optimism that the times, it's not just they could change, they will be changing, before he descends into deconstructing the world from which this album was born. It gives us hope that despite the inequality that we're going to be seeing throughout the rest of this record, that it's okay, because we will persevere in destroying the systems, the institutions, perpetuating the inequality he is about to show us. And it's a message that's as relevant today as it was in 1964, and perfectly exemplified in the final verse. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast, the slow one now will later be fast. As the present now will later be past, the order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last. For the times, they are a-changin'. One of the reasons I find the Times They Are A-Changin' to bear a stronger resemblance to Freewheelin more than maybe anything else on this record is that it continues Freewheelin's focus on more general themes and lamentations, more universal themes rather than specific events or specific people. The Times They Are A-Changin', like Blown in the Wind, is a timeless song of ideals and feelings, while the rest of the album, the Ballad of Hollis or the Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, focuses more on portraits of characters, factual, fictional, or somewhere just in between. I think it might be for this reason why many people consider this album to be the lesser child of Freewheelin. Its themes are less universal, they're less obvious. But for me, the lyrics are stronger as a whole because Dylan does such an exceptional job at really bringing these characters and events to life, using their stories and tales to demonstrate and concretize the ideas that he's singing about. Anyone can just mindlessly sing about peace and equality in an abstract way, but making it relatable and empathetic on a human level is such an incredible skill. And this inevitably leads me to the greatest masterpiece from this album, The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, a powerful account of injustice from a time of racial segregation. It's about the murder of a black barmaid, Hattie Carroll, by the wealthy white man, William Zanzinger, who only received 6 months in prison for his brutal assault and murder. On first listening to this song, it can feel a little uneventful, maybe even boring. The lyrics initially just seem to be a simple retelling of the facts of the case, which alone wouldn't really be anything particularly notable. Anyone can recite the details of a case to a basic chord progression. But to take that away from the song would be to simply not pay it enough attention. Dylan skillfully balances the real-life fact of the scenario with a certain degree of poetic license in order to really emphasize the most important aspects and bring out the key themes here. It's a brilliant example of the way Dylan's able to fuse poetry and music in a way that nobody else had really done before. The music gives life and vivacity to the events described. This is not just a poem which happens to be sung. It's not even just a chord progression which happens to have words to it. The two are so closely intertwined, rising and falling with each other as each aspect demands it. The first verse gives a general overview of events as William Zanzinger kills Hattie Carroll and is put into custody for first-degree murder. From this verse alone, you would assume naively that surely justice will be served, the police have their man, the court system will surely bring him to justice. But the second verse casts doubt upon that assumption. It shows William Zanzinger as a son of wealthy parents, a successful tobacco farmer with links in high office, and that because of his position and his power, he's already out on bail after violently killing a black woman. The third verse brilliantly changes perspective to the victim, Hattie Carroll, and provides a deeply human and empathetic account of her as a 51-year-old woman with 10 children working as a waitress. And in this, Dylan illustrates it with maybe my favourite rhyme in any poem of the English language, as he rhymes table with itself 3 times in a row. And never sat once at the head of the table, and didn't even talk to the people at the table, who just cleaned up all the food from the table. By emphasizing table so clearly here, he draws our attention to Hattie's passivity in this situation. She was a poor woman doing her best. She never got to sit at the head of the table. She never even got to talk to the people who she was serving as a black woman. She just cleaned up their food. She tried to fit into the racially segregated world into which she was born, but that wasn't enough to protect her from the racists and the rich who systematically would abuse their power. But this song doesn't feel like it's just about Hattie Carroll. This is the injustice song of all injustices. To anyone who's experienced or witnessed or been affected by something which just felt unjust. Dylan channels one woman's death into a universal feeling, and it's so powerful. One could criticise it for not being exactly true to the real events and real trial of the real William Zantzinger, that maybe he doesn't give Zantzinger a fair shake, but he doesn't need to. This is merely an example of racial injustice, and Dylan is concerned with the whole, not just the part. And the whole story this presents, the whole tale of racial inequality, that's unquestionably real. Further into the record, Dylan continues his exploration of political topics, which is what I love about this record. It is why it is my favourite Dylan acoustic album. And with God on Her Side, he explores the way that history is told, the narrative of history itself. The popular adage goes that history is only told by the victors, and Dylan wishes to dismantle the arrogant nationalist perspectives that are told in this way, that tarnish the way our history is spoken of. He talks of how history tells us that the conquerors of America had God on their side, so their acts were justified. That the Germans in World War II believed that they had God on their side, that their actions were justified, that hating the Russians is justified since the Americans have God on their side, that perhaps even Judas Iscariot, when betraying Jesus, believed that he had God on his side. That such a belief and arrogance of being right, justified with God, apparently justifies even the most heinous of actions. But really, as Dylan sings at the end, if God's on our side, he'll stop the next war. Only a pawn in their game is another interesting perspective. On the surface, it looks like it's about the assassination of the civil rights activist Medgar Evers, but Dylan uses this as a frame to explore the origins of racism in the white working classes, attributing it to politicians leveraging the white working classes against the African American civil rights campaigners by manipulating them into hating black people. Now, one can debate the veracity of how true this is historically, and admittedly I don't have the historical knowledge to be able to verify it one way or another, but I don't think Dylan's really concerned with the strict truth of the matter. This is a grand narrative illustrating how easy it was for the poor white people to be manipulated by the powerful into thinking that black people were the enemy, as if to deflect the blame from the wealthy and the powerful who were causing the economic conditions that would exploit the poor white people. Instead, they end up turning against the black folks, not the wealthy oppressors. And this is not a true origin story in the strictest sense of it. It's more something to make you think and reflect upon the way that the very systems that we inhabit are constructed. But not every song is so overtly political as the ones I've been describing. There's many personal and reflective songs on the album, though all of them share a profound sense of melancholy to them. They aren't full of hope or happiness, but they also don't betray a complete abandonment or cynicism on the ideas of love and relationships either. One Too Many Mornings is a delicate song of lost love. Two people who, through no bitterness, no fault or bile, have gently drifted apart. They're just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. Similarly is the sublime Boots of Spanish Leather, another mournful song, a dialogue between two lovers becoming increasingly estranged. One sails away to a far-off land, Spain, by the looks of it. She wishes to send him something to remember her by, but all he wants is her carried back unspoiled from across the lonesome ocean. She insists again to send him something, and he in frustration responds that the same thing he'd want today would be what he'd want tomorrow. Her. He then receives a final letter, speaking of how she won't be returning back again. It just depends on how she's a-feeling. It's a profoundly nuanced and, dare I say, breakup song, though it isn't a breakup song in the sense that you would find in Blood on the Tracks or Tangled Up in Blue or The Bitterness of Idiot Wind. It's again like One Too Many Mornings, a song of slow estrangement, two people simply drifting apart. Freewheelin may be more popular, but for me the Times They Are A-Changin is richer. It's more profound, more meaningful, more beautiful, more heartbreaking, more relevant, more current. Dylan questions society and challenges his listener to act against the injustice they see, to be appalled by the state of the world. But he also manages to bring his listener to tears with tales of heartbreak and woe. But in the end, through all of these different themes, political and personal, he's able to capture the key feeling that really makes humans special: empathy. Look, I will admit there is a political naivety towards the system in this album and how political change really works in reality. And some could even argue, based on statements made by Dylan later, that this is a disingenuous album. This is not a genuine political statement. This is Dylan trying to be cool, trying to be what people were making him out to be this voice of a generation. But that's just something I can't believe. The songs are far too insightful and profound. It's clear he was bothered by these issues. But perhaps he then just realised that you can't change the world with a folk song. Maybe that's true. That's not really for me to judge. Maybe he just wanted to be a songwriter and a singer. He didn't want to be the face of a political movement. He couldn't deal with the responsibility, and that's fine. But regardless, this is an album that, as I'm filming this in June 2020, feels just as pertinent as ever, as the old order is rapidly fading, and the times they are a-changin'. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and next week I'm going to be reviewing Dylan's brand new album, Rough and Rowdy Ways, or if you're watching this album way into the future, then it'll appear on the end in a couple of seconds. So, take a look at it either way. Thanks so much for watching. This has been TheAIbumMan. Long live rock and roll.